You're listening to I Have Some Notes, a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported.
Han Solo, arguably the coolest Star Wars character, agreed?
Oh, yeah.
Ever wonder how he got his laser blaster?
No, not really.
Remember the dice hanging from the Millennium Falcon? How'd he get those?
There were dice?
How about his name?
His name?
Yeah.
I don't know. Who cares?
Well, these are all questions I answer in my Han Solo prequel film.
I have some notes. Welcome, everyone, to I Have Some Notes. It's a new season of cuts, keeps, punch-ups, and tweaks for mediocre movies as voted by you. I'm your host, Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm Greg Beaver.
And today we are discussing the 28 film Solo, A Star Wars Story. And we are joined by our now regular guest. 3 makes it regular. Host of, or no, I guess not host, but GM for the live play podcast, Quantum Kickflip, now a member of the Alberta Podcast Network. Please welcome Robin Slack back to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This feels good now that we're Quantum Kickflip is on the network with you guys. It felt a little bit shady before, it's kind of off the books, but now we're official network members, so this is all above board now. It's legal for me to be here.
Yeah, it's all grandfathered in too. So
yes, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here, and thank you to our listener request line. Not line, it's Twitter. But nevertheless, thank you to our listener who requested this, is what I was trying to say. Chris, over on Twitter. Thank you very much. Throughout this season, we will be soliciting suggestions from you on our social media at I Have Some Notes. So if you're not already following along, come get in on the action. You can vote and suggest and help us decide what movies we're going to do next.
Though it is worth noting that just that first round of asking for suggestions netted us enough movie suggestions for 2 full seasons of the show.
Yeah.
But not quite enough for me to love every movie we're going to do in a season. So please keep them coming.
Yeah,
if you feel like you really want to suggest one, we're listening.
For sure.
And we might have to do special requests for things like, Christmas movies and Halloween movies and those kinds of things. So yeah, keep an eye on the social media for sure. And select how you wish to punish us.
Mm-hmm.
Or don't. That's also an option.
Yeah, you could pick good movies.
Well,
a very short episode of I Have Some Notes, just it's fine.
Hey, we all really liked Interstellar, and we still spun a full episode out of that one. So
that's fair. That's
But yeah, it's been a new season. We're back, or it is a new season. We're back from a bit of a break. Before we get into talking Alden Ehrenreich and co. What have you all been watching recently? Anything exciting you want to either recommend or dissuade?
Well, over the summer, some friends and I finally got around to watching all of the Planet of the Apes movies. All of them. In chronological release order, from the first Heston film to the most recent of the reboot films. And let me tell you, some of them are actually very good. Some of them are not very good, especially some of the older ones, and the Tim Burton one is just bonkers nonsense. But there are some quite good movies in there, including some of the original ones, actually.
I love that moment in the Tim Burton one, because when a movie does a big plot twist and the kind of the atmosphere of the movie when they're revealing the twist and being see, look what, do you get it? This is what happened the whole time. And it has that tone, but the twist is completely incomprehensible. I've never had that experience where a movie is see, and I'm no, I really don't. What? What are you trying to, what did you do? It's a wild experience. It feels like you're reality has shifted or you're on some kind of drug that you're just like, no, I really don't comprehend what I'm supposed to be taking away from this.
Tim Burton's working on a level that's much higher than his audience, clearly.
The Burton film, I will say this, it has an excellent cast, which is wasted on that movie, and they have fantastic practical effects. It looks really good. But it is, again, it's incomprehensible nonsense. The reboot, actually, and I mean, I kind of knew going in that it had gotten some good reviews, but it was even better than I expected. The second movie in particular, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, is a just honestly great movie. And if you like decent sci-fi, you should definitely check it out. Watch the first one first, because the second one makes sense in context with the first one. But
Yeah.
those two,
Yeah.
if you watch any of the rebooted ones, the third one is The first two are phenomenal and are worth checking out for sure.
Yeah, it's a really tight trilogy. I'm a fan of Matt Reeves, and I'm I wasn't really needing another Batman, but because he's involved in it, I'm super interested to see how that goes. So, yeah, I do like the Apes trilogy, the modern trilogy.
That Batman movie is one of the few that I think benefited from a COVID delay, where like when they announced it, I was very Batman fatigued and was like, I don't know that I need another Batman flick. And now it's been delayed long enough that I'm like, I could go for a Batman flick. That'd go down real smooth right now.
Well, yeah, speaking of DC superheroes, I went and saw the Suicide Squad in a whole movie theater. In a ding-dang theater in the corporeal space where other people are.
And you did a very nice thing too, because you very generously treated all of us to the safest movie experience in a theater that we could possibly have during a pandemic. So apparently, I didn't even know until you told me that you could just rent out a theater for $250. That's awesome. And
thank you again for that. Ruled. That was so much fun.
So I just wanted to say thank you very much for allowing us all to go see Suicide Squad.
I appreciate it. Yeah, this is not an not fishing for pats on the back, nor am I trying to sell. I have no stakes in Cineplex, but you can rent a whole Cineplex for about $250. Most first run movies are in there. So like if you're jonesing to go see Shang-Chi or whatever, if you either have an extra $250 kicking around or you're willing to harangue 20 friends into giving you $12.50 each.
Which is cheaper than a regular movie ticket, actually.
Yeah. You and 20 friends can get a whole Cineplex yourself. So, and you can go see Suicide Squad, which was pretty good.
Yeah.
I liked that I don't think this is a spoiler. And if it is, I guess now this is your spoiler warning.
Hit the 30-second button.
Yeah, skip to about 30 seconds. But the fact that a whole bunch of characters die in the first 15 minutes of the movie, I thought was just like, it set the tone for what was going to be a fun romp otherwise. But I just like the fact that they like get you excited for all these wacky characters. Like they all seem like they are perfect for a James Gunn style superhero flick, and then he just ganks more than half of them. It was, yeah.
Yeah, the movie is...
Some other...
I described it to Anita as cartoonishly violent. Like, it is a gory movie, but it is, like, you can see James Gunn's history as at working with trauma films there. It is very cartoonishly gory.
I liked every part of that except for the parts where it knew how clever it was. There were a lot of really great jokes that I, like, laughed at, and then the movie, like, kind of patted itself on the back too hard, and I was like, well, now I don't like that joke anymore.
Yeah.
But overall, loved it. Yeah. Great time.
I'm curious, can you give an example of one of those types of jokes? Do you have one off the top of your head?
Oh, off the dome. I'm trying to remember one that's like not too much of a spoiler. Liam, you got any?
I remember because you and I talked about it after the scene where Steve Agee in his Black Ops chair in the control room turns and looks right at the camera and is like, "We got a kaiju up in this bitch."
Yeah, exactly. Like the
like,
giant, I mean, again, not to spoil anything, but like the kaiju reveal was very fun. And then the guy commenting on the kaiju reveal was like, well, okay.
I would say I liked it about as much as Birds of Prey. Birds of Prey was like consistent like consistently I was on board for, and then there was a lot of ups and downs in this one. But at the end, the net ups and downs of the Suicide Squad averages out to Birds of Prey, which was like
exactly one Birds
throughout.
of Prey. Yeah.
Yeah, if tonally speaking, Birds of Prey and Suicide Squad are kind of the direction that DC Films wants to move, I'm definitely down for it.
Or if they just want to keep doing one-offs that are completely different from one another, I'm totally fine with that too. Like,
not everything needs to be a shared universe.
No.
Yeah.
And when your direct competition originated that whole business model, maybe it's okay to just let them have it and do something different instead of imitating them and failing at every turn.
Yeah. Because you don't have a Kevin Feige who's like sitting there at the top, like masterminding it all.
Yeah.
You've got disparate weirdos scrambling to recreate Kevin Feige's work. And it's like, just don't. Yeah.
It's weird because I do actually find myself slightly more interested in what DC's offering these days because the Marvel universe has gone on so long, and most of those movies are starting to feel a little samey. Who knows if they might be able to shake it up in the future or not? But I don't know. I'm kind of done with that universe a little bit after Avengers. I'll go see Spidey just because he's my favorite hero, but that's kind of where it ends, I think, for me.
They can win me back with a decent take on the X-Men if they're able to like thread that needle and work them into the universe in a way that's like fun and different. I'll be back on board.
I mean, they just broke the universe and turned it into a multiverse, so
that's true.
The X-Men are coming. It's just a matter of time. Speaking of movies that have perhaps unnecessary sequels.
Yeah, today the day we're recording the Matrix, what's it called? Resurrections trailer dropped. Did y'all check it out?
Absolutely.
There was something about it visually that felt off, and I don't think I could quite describe it. And I don't know if it's like some of the visual effects were not done, or that it's shot on digital and it just looks very, very different from the original because it's quite clean. Whereas I feel like the original Matrix felt very dirty, just both in its aesthetic, but also the film grain and all that kind of stuff. Did you guys catch that at all?
I think the color grade is really different. Like the original Matrix had a very, very green, and I know it's different depending on like which remaster you watch of it, but like the color grade was intense on those first ones. It was very, very stylized in a way that this one didn't feel. Like like you said, much cleaner and just much more like...
Yeah, it looked a little bit more like Sense8 to me than The Matrix.
I could see that, yeah.
Is it possible that will be changed by the time the movie hits theaters, though? Because this is trailer footage, and sometimes that hasn't been given like the final color grading and the last pass on digital effects. So the footage that we're seeing right now in the trailer could be much more green by the time it hits theaters.
Could very much so, yeah. I'm interested to see, like, I have no desire for a new Matrix sequel, and I don't know that there's any story left to tell there, because, like, you could argue there wasn't enough story to justify the other two sequels they already made, so I don't know that we need a fourth movie in the franchise. But also just the fact that, like, everyone's back, and, like, the one of the two original directors is back, and, like, it feels like they at least think they have a story to tell. So I'm ready to be pleasantly surprised by this. And if it's bad, it's not like when a Star Wars or a Marvel is bad and I feel like personally betrayed. It's just like, it can be bad and I'll just not watch it. And that's also fine.
Yeah.
I think Lana Wachowski is never boring. And I think
totally
that's
fair.
the best. Yeah, I think that's a very high compliment you can pay to any director. Really, it's just like, whatever she's doing. I may not be 100% down for it, but like I'm usually getting at least something out of it.
This is the Arcade Fire argument, but for film instead of music, where I'm just like, I love that band because they'll never bore me. I don't love every record they've done, but like, I would take a bad Arcade Fire album over a lot of other bands' really polished stuff any day,
Nice. But yeah, we all watched Solo, a Star Wars movie, very recently, so that we could give it some notes.
Some of us for the multipleth time.
Yeah, this was my first outing with it. Greg, I think you're in the same boat.
Yeah. I've gone on record on this podcast that I did not want to watch it, and I would only watch it for this show.
Of course, this film directed by Ron Howard. I realize it wasn't the last episode of the year. That was Wonder Woman 1984, but the second last one we sat down and recorded was also an Opie joint. So we're taking old Howie to task on this. Sorry, Ron. But yeah, directed by Ron Howard.
I mean, to be fair, he was nobody's first choice to direct this movie. He was very much the pitch hitter.
Forgot about all that.
And yet he still managed to fit his brother Clint into the movie, so there you go.
He sure did.
Jonathan Kasdan and Lawrence Kasdan wrote the thing, and then, of course, it stars Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo, Woody Harrelson as Beckett, Emilia Clarke as Kira, Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian, and many, many more. A wonderful cast. So we'll go to the trailer and get into our thoughts on the film.
You're after something. Is it revenge? Money? Or is it something else? You look good. A little rough around the edges, but good.
Heard about a job. Big shot gangster putting together crew.
I'm a driver, and I'm a flyer. I waited a long time for a shot like this. What do you think? Well, what do you know?
So glad we took this job!
Han, a young criminal on Corellia, wants to get out of the slums and become a pilot. Finding himself solo with nothing but a pair of golden dice, Han joins the Imperial Army, but the insubordinate scoundrel ends up being thrown in a pit with a Wookiee named Chewbacca. The two break out and begin a life of crime, meeting up with a gambling con man named Lando Calrissian. Lando has a ship called the Millennium Falcon, and Han is determined to win it in a card game. And he gets his iconic gun from a fellow criminal. Also, the Falcon looks like a hunk of junk because Han wrecks it the first time he flies it, making the Kessel Run in an impossible 12 parsecs. Also, he got a hot tip he could smuggle for Jabba the Hutt. Also, Darth Maul for some reason. Oh, and there's actually a pretty great space heist movie going on, full of crosses and double crosses, but that's all secondary to all this origin stuff.
The reason that I didn't want to watch Solo: A Star Wars Story is just because of all that stuff that Scott just rattled off. Like, I hate when prequels explain things that don't need to be explained. I don't care how he got his gun. I don't care about dice. I don't care about how he got his name. That was the most egregious one. But I will say this, like, having resolved myself not to watch it because of those reasons, when I finally got to sit down in front of the movie, I found myself not as bothered by them because I was expecting them to feel like a speed bump in the movie, and it didn't really happen that way. The only thing I'll say about, like, most of them felt more or less fine, except for when he got his name. I just thought that there was a slightly better way of handling that scene that might have actually been funny rather than kind of lame.
It's remarkable how many of those fan servicey origin bits of, like, how did he get blank? The answer is just a guy gave it to him, or from a guy. Like, for a movie so concerned with how he got all these things, so often it's like, how did he get his famous gun? A guy gave it to him. How did he get his name? A guy gave it to him. There's not really much more to the story than just like, he didn't have it, and then later he had it because a guy gave it to him. And I feel like you could do a lot more with some of these. And a couple of them are genuinely cool. I genuinely really liked the introduction of Chewie and how they first met. Like, that story was interesting and a fun set piece and would have been better served if it wasn't in there with 15 other fan service things that didn't need to be in there, you know?
I
Focus
will actually
on 2 or 3.
I want to give a shout out to Junice Suetomo, who plays Chewbacca in the movie, because Chewbacca is really good in this movie, you guys. I'm not joking. Like, it's a great portrayal of Chewbacca. It's a new actor playing Chewbacca in the film, and he brings a lot of great physicality. Chewie's all over the place in this film. He's not as much a he's kind of a secondary character, but he's a very prominent secondary character. And I really, really liked Chewie in this film.
I don't know that I've ever been disappointed to see Chewbacca show up in a movie, but I think you're also right that he's particularly good in this one.
It was weird when he showed up in Little Women, but
but he was really good in it, right?
But he was good in it. Yeah, he was pretty good. Yeah, the fan service stuff. Yeah, it just could have been more clever. Just like be cool about it. Like it's like someone. It's. I think I've used this comparison before, but it's always what I think of when they do that. It's like asking someone if they came, where it's like, don't ask, just kind of like know that it worked. Don't ruin the moment by being like, so, huh? Yeah, he got a blaster. Just be cool about it, man.
I was surprised by, as I watched through the movie for the third time today, the third time total, not the third time in one day. But I kept a little notepad just of like things that bugged me and then also good things that I enjoyed about the movie. I was surprised by the good things list. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that I actually really dug. It has a lot of potential. There's a couple of egregious things that bug me that we'll get to in the fixes, I'm sure. But like, the list of just like little moments that delighted me was longer than I ever expected it to be.
Give us some hits.
There's a moment early in the movie where he sees a recruiting station for the Imperial Army, and the PA system is playing the Imperial March with some military propaganda asking people to enroll in the army, making the Imperial March, like the famous da 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 Star Wars music, exists within the Star Wars universe, and like the characters in Star Wars are aware of that melody, and that's wild to me. The idea that Darth Vader might sometimes get it stuck in his head and be walking down the hallway of the Death Star like humming his own theme music because it exists in the world with him. I love that they did that. That's fantastic. This movie is worth it just for that.
Just further to that, I love the transition they do there, where they've got the Imperial March playing as like a kind of upbeat jingle in the background while they're doing the recruiting pitch, and then it transitions to 3 years later, and the music immediately drops down to a dark tone, and he's in the middle of like a hellish war zone, and things are going terribly. And that's a great transition in this movie.
I liked, there was a scene in a like upscale lounge when they first meet the main villain of the movie, and there's just like a musical performance going on with this like lady in a cool gold dress and some crazy helmet, and then just like a green head in a jar. And the lady is a really impressive vocalist, and the green head in a jar is just like barely hitting the pitch, and it's just kind of like bo-do, and it's so good. It's so dumb and wild. There's a martial art. I don't know if I was gonna say I don't know if this is a spoiler. It's super not. One of the characters does a martial art called Terras Kasi that is like a deep cut pull from a PlayStation 1 Star Wars
fighting game. I had that PlayStation 1 game. I owned that game.
It's a wild game where the Star Wars heroes all get into a Mortal Kombat style martial arts tournament with like a hired assassin of the Emperor. There's this fighting style that is now recanonized by this movie.
Here's the best part, is in that video game, there was a cheat you could activate which made everybody's heads big, and if you did it to Darth Vader, he looked like Dark Helmet.
Oh, that's very good. I'll give one more. I love the way that Jon Favreau pronounces Wookiee as Wookiee every time he says it.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
It's like the slightest little thing, but it feels like a very lived in, like the way some people say aluminium in different, like depending on your dialect. It just feels like, this is how his race says Wookiee. They say it Wookiee every time. And it's delightful.
Yeah, I really liked the whole crew. The little four-arm Jon Favreau guy and Thoughty Newton. The whole crew. I have thoughts on the heist crew, but they were sort of my favorite characters. And a little bit wanted to see more of them, but not in any kind of like criticism way. Just like I like those actors.
The cast in general rules. Paul Bettany is fantastic in this movie. I
Yes.
love his performance so much.
He feels so dangerous. The way that he plays Dryden Voss feels like someone who could fly off the handle at any second over any word that you say in a sentence and could murder you for it. And yet at the same time can just put on such a genteel and friendly demeanor. And it makes him seem like a very dangerous and unhinged man. And he plays it so well.
The introduction of his character where we cut to him mid murdering a guy and just like breathing heavily and just like fully like unleashing his rage, and then he turns on a dime and stifles it and goes back into like charming host mode. But like you get that taste of it so that everything else from that point on you're like, oh, we know where this could go. We've seen him waste a dude with his cool lightsaber dagger. This could happen at any moment. Love it.
Donald Glover is great in this film as well.
Phenomenal.
Playing Billy D. Williams, playing Lando Calrissian.
The delivery is like spot on. Like just the way I don't even want to try to imitate it, but the way he phrases stuff was really fun.
Yeah. He's clearly having a lot of fun, and I sincerely wish that we could get a Lando Calrissian movie starring Donald Glover.
I think it's a planned Disney Plus show.
Series.
I want it.
Sure that's,
give it to me.
That's on the slate, yeah.
Shut up and take my money. Like right now. Do it.
I'll even give it up to the lead. Like Alden Ehrenreich, I think had a tough job to do enough of a Harrison Ford impression that we buy him as a young Harrison Ford, but not so much that it's annoying and just a caricature. And I think he threaded the needle just fine.
I don't know that he was like. It reminds me of Chris Pine's turn as Kirk, in the sense that like he wasn't really doing an impression of the character or of Shatner. He was just doing Chris Pine, but every once in a while he would throw in these little Shatnerisms, these little mannerisms of Shatner, and it was it was just enough to get it kind of pitch perfect. And I think Alden. I'm sorry, how do you pronounce his name?
Ehrenreich.
He did more or less the same thing, where he was more or less just being his charming self, but he would do the kind of squints and things like that, and some of the facial mannerisms, and just kind of in places just get it right so that it felt very much like Han.
Yeah, Chris Pine in Star Trek is a really good reference point for that. It's a very similar portrayal. Yeah.
Also, Woody Harrelson is just great. And he plays like a gruff criminal guy very well. And Beckett is delightful because he is at once likable and completely untrustworthy. And that plays through the entire movie. And I think that they did a really good job with that character.
Do you want to talk about any of the major issues that may need fixing come the latter part of the show?
Kind of keeps and cuts without getting too much into like we want the problems, we'll save the solutions for the second half.
Exactly.
I have a very specific
much.
problem.
Okay.
I should probably go first because mine's not plot related. The movie's ugly, and I don't like the look of it at all. The color grading is bad, muddy most of the time. There seems to be this desire to want every scene to be kind of like an almost monotone. There's not really a lot of contrast in colors in any of the scenes, particularly action scenes. Like it's either brown, like puke green, or a bright blue cast or something like that. But you just it pulled me out of the movie a few times just because I felt like I could have been watching something much more interesting if it was a little bit more colorful, or if it was shot in a bit more of an interesting way.
It felt very self-conscious. It felt like it wanted to be a very gritty, rough and tumble kind of a Star Wars. Like, this isn't fun space fantasy. This is like the down and dirty Star Wars. And the way they chose to get that across was by making every frame look like mud. And I feel like they didn't have to try so hard to be down and I don't know.
It's interesting because you can juxtapose it with The Mandalorian, which
Yeah.
is very Star Warsy and is like a gritty, like down in the mud Star Wars, but it's visually interesting. It's nice. It's beautiful to look at in many cases.
I think it's funny because they had the template already, because I think whatever you think about Rogue One, Gareth Edwards nailed the look of that kind of gritty Star Wars feel.
Totally, yeah.
This movie tries to do too much. It's trying to have its cake and eat it too, and there's too much of like we need to explain every little thing about Han Solo, and I think that's to the movie's detriment, and it's the real place where the movie falls down. You can do some of it, like Robin, you even mentioned like you really liked the Chewie set piece. I did too. You can have like some of it in there. You don't need to explain every little thing. Han didn't need to have his entire character stamped out in a week. And I think that we could have hinted at some stuff without showing it. I have some ideas for some changes for things where like we maybe are setting up for something in the future, but don't actually go there. And I think that if you toned that back quite a bit, the movie would have been a lot more fun, and we could have spent more time with the heist, which is the best part of this movie.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it in terms of, like, his entire character being stamped out in a week, but now that you mention, like, yeah, big week for Han.
Yeah.
All of his defining personality traits and notable catchphrases and paraphernalia came to him within this one very short time span.
Yeah, and then he's off to meet Jabba the Hutt, and that kind of completes everything we know about him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. The heart of the movie is where I find the biggest fault. I can forgive the fan service to a certain extent, which is something I'm surprised to hear myself say out loud. But the criminal group that he falls into after the escaping the centipede criminal element, like the one with Woody Harrelson and Thaddeus Newton, that group was not on screen long enough to earn the emotional deaths that the movie wanted us to think that we were feeling. They could have worked, like, the beats were kind of there, but like just because I don't know the characters well enough, I don't really care that Thaddeus Newton sacrifices herself, or that the forearm guy, got taken down and was doing his best to hold everything together and be brave and stuff like that. Like, it works in isolation, but just like without the setup, it wasn't very good. So I felt like that kind of thing trailed on throughout most of the movie, where the character relationships were okay, but not enough to really make me care. Like, they wanted Woody Harrelson to be Han Solo's father figure, and that only kind of works. Like, it has the advantage of, like, we do get to spend a lot of time with Woody Harrelson and Han, but there's not enough going on in their relationship to really make me feel like they're two characters that care about each other.
Jon Favreau's little alien dude is particularly egregious in that complaint. Like, he gets, I feel like, this is exaggerating, but like 2 lines of dialogue, one of which is like, you don't need anybody, everyone's fine on their own, and then he gets shot, and then he's like, don't die alone, kid. Everyone needs somebody. I was like, wow, this character was like, I see exactly why you're in the movie and what plot device you're like, why you're here and what lesson you're meant to impart. We barely met you, and that's like the only 2 things you got to say. And then something about a Minoc roast.
It's the same thing with L3, the robot that
Okay, this is my big one, yeah.
Yeah, feels like she's got kind of like a thing for Lando Calrissian, and then of course it's implied that Lando Calrissian has a thing for her. Like, the only reason we know that is one line of dialogue while they're flying to their destination in the Millennium Falcon, and that's it. Yeah. And then she gets like this big death scene where Lando Calrissian is absolutely devastated that she has died. And again, it's just like, I feel nothing. I'm sorry. I know what you're trying to do, but it's not working.
Everything about how that character was handled, like, that's my biggest complaint, or my biggest, like, that character felt so gross on so many levels to me, that they give her this plot about activism, and that she's like, I view droids as an oppressed underclass of people. I view droids as, like, sentient creatures who are being kept in subjugation and oppressed, and it's mostly played for, like, laughs, or, like, the other characters are just, like, mildly annoyed with her shtick. And then the idea that what she prizes above all else is, like, her sentience and her freedom, and the ultimate fate of that character is, like, truly existentially horrifying.
She gets downloaded into the Falcon forever.
The fact that she's, like, the first really prominent female-coded droid that we've seen, and her characteristics are, like, she's a social justice activist in an annoying way. She's, like, the stereotype of an annoying feminist that you would see dudes complaining about on the internet, and also has a thing for Lando, maybe, and, like, her two qualities are, like, annoying activism and talk about boys is like, wildly problematic, and, like, just misses the point so hard. And then it's all just one big yikes for me. And I hate that is in the movie, and I don't even know. I have ideas of, like, what could be done with it that we can talk about in the fixes, but, like, mostly my impulse is, like, don't do it. If you're going to dig into the whole oppressed underclass subtext of droids, that needs to be a whole movie of its own. You can't tack that on as a D plot on a Han Solo origin. It's not going to go the way you want it to go.
So it's interesting that you bring that up, because one of the things that Anita had a problem with the movie with was Han's romantic history with Kira, which is interesting because she framed it as knowing that Han is going to end up with Leia several years from now in future movies, him having this, like, love of his life that he's willing to, like, go out of his way to chase and go back to and has been thinking of for all these years. And then not having that end in a final way at the end of the movie, leaving it open like, oh, like, they still care about one another, felt kind of weird for her. And I kind of agreed with it. And on the one hand, I'm like, Han's a grown man. He's allowed to have relationships outside of the woman he eventually marries. But at the same time, they really frame it as this was, like, his one true love. And that's kind of weird, knowing that eventually he's going to end up with a different woman. And I kind of agree with that. The movie frames it really weird and in perhaps a gross kind of way. And I think that also needs to get a little tweak. And to be fair, one of the things that I'm just going to spoil it now. One of the things I intend to cut is the starting of the movie with him in Corellia. I think if you need to chop 15 minutes off the movie, there's 15 minutes that can go away right there. We can start 100%. With him in the army. So
that's a good way to put it. Especially because we never see that the Lady Praxis or whatever, like the sewer swamp thing. I'm like, this is a great look. It's that, like, character. Cool, like, Henson looking puppet thing, even though it's CGI. And yeah, we get 5 minutes with the sewer crime syndicate.
Never comes back up. Yep.
Never comes up.
So I think that's an easy chop. And then that gets rid of that romantic history with Kira. I think you can still have sparks fly with him and Kira when she gets introduced, but I don't think you need the background, and I don't think you need to frame it as this is his one true lost love. This is the woman that he's always pined after. I don't think you need that.
I think she needs to be less of the love of his life and more like that girl that you thought you were in love with in high school that then you, like, grow up and become a different person and realize that you have grown into incompatible people. Like, that's what we need, and that's going to tie into my proposed fixes. But yeah, that's I think where this needed to go, and instead it's weirdly left as like I'll always carry a torch for you.
It seems like they're even trying it too by having him be like the good, like, she's like, you're the good guy, and then we find out later she's maybe a bad guy, which is before we go to the break, where I just want to tuck this in here. You guys have been we're doing this over video chat. We're gonna take a break here, come back. So if everyone wants to pull out their swords and start waving them around here at the end of this video call, that would I think be just appropriate way. That's how video calls end, right? Where you just sort of wave your sword around for no reason, Darth Maul.
Yeah, you got to pull it out,
hanging up a phone call,
and turn it on so that everyone remembers that you had a cool sword in a different movie.
Yeah. So let's all unsheath our swords, take a little break, and when we come back, we'll have some notes for Solo: A Star Wars Story.
With Pod Power, our sponsors are making it possible for us to amplify the voices of Albertans and Alberta podcasters. This episode, the Edmonton Community Foundation is helping us give a Pod Power shout-out to Overdue Finds, an Edmonton Public Library podcast. Bryce Crittenden and Carolyn Land host conversations about books, movies, music, pop culture, and other interesting news about Edmonton. It's a great way to learn more about what's happening at EPL and about how you can use your library card to access all of EPL's in-person and online services. To listen and find out more about Overdue Finds, head to epl.ca/podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to I Have Some Notes. Fellas, let's get into our notes for Solo: A Star Wars Story.
I'm going to start just because I already spoiled one of my big things last half of the show, which is cut the beginning. Just carve that whole part on Corellia right out and throw it on the editing room floor. I don't think it does enough. And I think that a lot of the introduction to Han stuff could have been shifted to his time as an Imperial infantryman. I think that would extend out that set piece a little bit, which is good because it's a very good set piece. It gets rid of his tragic I will always carry a torch for you backstory with Kira, because I think it's more interesting if maybe he meets Kira for the first time when he gets hooked up with Beckett and with Drayden Voss. Some sparks fly. She likes him a little bit because he's this brash newcomer. She sticks up for him. Maybe there's a little bit of romance there, but it doesn't work out by the end, and that's okay because it's like a young man, one of his early trysts, right? Mm-hmm. So I just think you carve out the Corellia stuff, you throw it in the garbage, and you've already got 15 minutes less of movie.
You know what I like about that too? I feel like this movie was trying to sort of traffic in the themes of he's the good guy surrounded by finding quote unquote bad guys to contrast him with. And if you start him off as an Imperial soldier, just ganking villagers and being an Imperial soldier, and then kind of gets caught up in this criminal crowd instead, it just helps that arc, I think, of him learning to be a bit, realize his deep down he's a hero and a good guy, and he doesn't have to be. Not only does he not have to be an Imperial soldier, he doesn't have to be a criminal or a crook or a jerk or a
I think I don't think he needs to necessarily be a war criminal at the beginning.
I guess I was exaggerating. I just like the idea of
but
him,
I think you can still have the beats where he's insubordinate. He asks too many questions. He's too much of a free thinker to really fit in, and that's what naturally leads him to A, get in trouble and thrown into the Wookiee pit, but also B, very easily fall in with a group of criminals and desert the second the opportunity shows up.
Yeah.
I do think this movie didn't quite know how to resolve, because Han has an arc in the original trilogy going from a scoundrel who only cares about himself to a noble hero who has given himself over to a cause that is bigger than him and who is selfless and cares about others and falls in love and all of this stuff. He has this arc, and I feel like this movie didn't quite know what to do because, you can't just have him be a static scoundrel for the entire movie, so they almost tried to invert it and have him be a nice and noble guy who falls from grace, which is an interesting idea, but I feel like it just ends up being boring because we know that we're just going to see this arc in reverse later on. So watching that, maybe he is a good guy deep down is we already know that that's coming later. And I think that's where this movie stumbles a lot, is it doesn't quite know what it wants to say about Han Solo. I have a different track that I would take the fix. That I think you could still make it work with cutting Corellia, but the history with Kira would need to stay. My big pitch for the... Can I jump in? I don't know. My big pitch is you've got these two characters, Kira and Enfys Nest, who, boy, is it telling that when we talked about the movie for a solid half the show, Enfys Nest didn't come up at any point. Supposed to be a major character in this movie, but like very mishandled and ultimately very forgettable. I feel like they should be the same person. I feel like Kira and Enfys Nest should be one character.
Bingo.
So you have a similar history with Han and Kira. They grow up on the mean streets together in poverty. They're turning to crime and illicit activity. They get split up by circumstance and go off to lead separate lives. They both have different reactions to it. Han becomes very self-interested. He learns that the only, you got to look out for number one because you can't trust anyone else to do it for you. And the only person you should care about is yourself, kind of thing. And meanwhile, Kira, unseen to us, learns to, become part of something bigger than herself, learns to fight for the downtrodden, and activism is her deal. They both kind of have different reactions to growing up in poverty. And Kira grows up to be this freedom fighter, marauder, Enfys Nest, who is still a masked character when we first meet them, is still introduced as a potential antagonist. But then you get that moment later in the movie that they seem to want to be a reveal where she takes off her helmet and she's a lady, and it's played like that's a big shocking moment, but she's also a lady we've never met. And I guess like the shocking element is like she's both female when she's been kind of coded as male, and she's younger and less hardened than we would think she'd be. But like it really doesn't work as a reveal. I say in that moment, the helmet comes off and it's Kira, and she's,
That's brilliant.
What she's been doing this whole time is trying to fight her way out of poverty and fight for the people who didn't have the same opportunities as her, kind of thing. And Han has to reconcile what he has become with what she has become, and they ultimately find that they have just grown into two separate directions. And we get to contrast that with his later arc, that like he is going to go down that path later in the trilogy, but we don't see it in this movie because that's not what we're doing here. You have to contrast ideas of like what selflessness means, because Han thinks that he is very selfless because he's only ever cared about getting back to Kira to save her. But his selflessness is very individual and ultimately still self-serving. I want my love interest back, whereas hers is a greater activism kind of selflessness, like giving yourself over to a cause kind of thing. And we have to kind of explore the differences between those two.
I like this as well because it really gives Han a more solid motivation to give up the hyperfuel to Enfys Nest in the third act. Because if it's Kira, that's much more leverage, and that makes it a much harder decision for him, and it's less, I'm actually really a nice guy and a big softy, so of course I'm going to help the good guys, and more I can't say no to Kira.
And then we have a clear arc for Han. What is happening to Han Solo in this movie is he starts off as already a pretty scoundrel criminal kind of a guy, but someone who has one last genuine connection, one last thing outside of himself that he genuinely cares about, and that's Kira. And his arc in this movie is letting go of that last thing and becoming the completely self-interested scoundrel that we meet at the beginning of A New Hope, who no longer has any attachment to anyone other than looking out for number one, and has to learn all those lessons for the first time.
Well, I mean, he's still got Chewie, and he's kind of friends with Lando at the end.
That's fair. Okay. He's got a couple of connections.
Can his central conflict be that he continually is a deserter? Like if he if we get a cold open where Kira and Han go their separate ways, and Han's doing it for selfish reasons, and he buggers off, and Kira decides to try and stay and make a go of it on Corellia or something like that, or trying to save someone or whatever. I like how that dovetails into him getting into the Imperial Army, and then of course cutting bait from there as well. And then you can kind of have this sort of arc where he kind of learns his lesson a little bit, but at the very end he makes the choice not to go with her, thus continuing to set him up for being that guy who's not quite there yet in terms of being a hero when we get to A New Hope, right?
And the dramatic irony in A New Hope of him coming back and joining the cause. There you go.
Yeah.
I also feel like there's this beat at the end where Kira says she's going to go with Han, but instead goes and contacts Darth Maul for no reason. Sidebar, who is that for? If you've watched the extraneous media that explains that Darth Maul survived his mortal wound and has risen through the ranks as a crime lord, then this is not a reveal to you. You already know that all that stuff happened, so him showing up is just, oh, yeah, I knew that.
It's just more
And if you haven't watched that stuff, it's baffling, and you have no fucking clue why he's there and how he survived.
Yeah, it's just
and
more
it's completely unexplained. It's for nobody.
Speaking of fan service stuff, I think that there is some of the fan servicey stuff that we can lose in this movie. While I do think that Lando needs to be part of the heist, I absolutely 100% think they need the Falcon and Lando in this movie. I don't think the movie should end with Han getting the Falcon. I think the movie should end with him being like, one day that ship's going to be mine, and Lando being like, nah, no, it's my ship. It's always going to be my ship. I think Lando and Han should still end kind of as friends and allies, but Han should not be flying away on the Falcon at the end of this movie.
That's a great suggestion, and everything you guys have suggested here, I'm every time you've said something, I've like my eyes lit up because it helps what I was going to suggest. It all collapses in nicely because Scott said off the top of this movie just tries to do too many things, and I think by getting rid of some of the cold open nonsense, I love Robin's suggestion of just making Enfys Nest and Kira the same character. My pitch, and I know we love the scene where we met Chewbacca, but I would like to see that crew of rapscallions that he joins up with, instead of it being Woody Harrelson, Thaddeus Newton, and alien Jon Favreau, it should be Woody Harrelson, Thaddeus Newton, L337, Lando's robot, and Chewbacca are the team of criminals. And instead, and then there's another one. Instead of Thaddeus Newton dying, because that whole scene around the campfire, she's the one who's like, I don't trust him. I don't want him. Even the Jon Favreau alien is like, I don't know if I trust this guy, and it's Woody Harrelson who keeps going to bat for him, right? Yeah. I want to up Woody Harrelson going for bat for him. He's like, I love this kid. I'm going to be a mentor. This kid's great. I love him. And then he's the one who dies on the job. And now Thaddeus Newton is stuck with him. She didn't want to bring him along. She knew, and then so the whole thing about him being a deserter, he deserted, and it's what got Woody Harrelson killed, and she knew it. She fucking told you this kid's a deserter, but now she's stuck with him because we got to pay back Voss. And as much as it would mean less Woody Harrelson in the movie, I think, if not literally switching Thaddeus Newton and Woody Harrelson as who dies, whichever one lived should have been the one who wanted Han around the least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there's an easy fix to this that doesn't lose Beckett and Woody Harrelson from this movie, and that is that he's the one who wants him there the least. Yeah. And that the other two team members, both Favreau and Val, want him there. They're the ones who are like, hey, you know what, I got a good feeling about this kid, and then they both die, and Beckett is the one who ends up stuck with him and has to warm to him over the movie.
Fair enough. And then the reason, I mean, I guess like the Favreau alien can stay. It's fine, especially if he's going to die early on. But by putting Chewbacca and L337 in this crew, one, we save some time, even though you don't get the fun mud fight thing with Chewbacca. You can spend more time with L337 doing her robots are an oppressed people thing. You can spend more time of him like having to like, in the same way he's going to have to like earn Thaddeus Newton or antagonistic Woody Harrelson's trust. He's also got to earn Chewie's trust, right? This is the beginning of their they don't walk out of a pit friends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They get to grow on each other. And then, because the whole thing with the romance between L337 and Lando is weird as shit, like we said, when his new crew, or these people he's rolling around with, L337 and Lando meet, and immediately sparks fly. We can have a whole thing where it's like it's a whirlwind romance. It's going to be great. In fact, he might even get a line of like, I love that ship. It's my favorite ship. you might be a machine I love even more. Oh man, if there's any way you could do, like, bring them together, two great tastes taste great in one. Because like, isn't the whole thing that robot ends up in the Millennium Falcon? I see your hand. If Lando falls in love with this robot, and then we know one day she's going to end up in the Millennium Falcon, it makes the romance thing make more sense, and it's more time for her activism, and it's more time for him to get to know Chewie instead of immediately having a best friend for life. So that's my fix, is to change the crew of scoundrels.
The makeup of the crew, yeah.
Two things. First thing, I love that. Second, but more to that, I like the idea that Lando doesn't have L3 at the top, because it makes them more part of like a heist crew, because you need the guy with the ship, and you need the robot that's got the best astrogation computer. Like it becomes more of a get the team together thing, as opposed to these two are just already together.
Yeah, if she's got the best navigation computer, she can be the one who helps them get out of Imperial airspace.
Yeah. I kind of disagree with the Chewbacca thing, and it's only because, and this might be my total Star Wars fan wonkiness, Chewie does owe Han like a life debt. Han saved Chewie at some point, and it's loose canon, because all of the old stuff got thrown out, that it was because he saved him from slavery when he was an Imperial officer.
Later in this movie, he can, when Chewie maybe doesn't trust him, maybe he's going to cut and run. One of the times he's learning not to cut and run, which was Greg's fix, is he turns around and goes back and helps Chewie. And then we get a very clear, like, you fucking saved my life, Wookiee life debt moment. That also reinforces the cut and run theme.
I still kind of like him breaking Chewie out with him.
Put the pit scene 45 minutes later in the movie then.
I don't know. I'm on board with Liam on this one. I felt like, as much as I thought the pit was a fun moment, it also didn't feel like it had the gravity of like, oh, that's the thing he owes him a life debt for? Like he tricked him into shoulder checking a post one time? I don't know. I feel like you could do a lot more with that.
Yeah. Just that scene isn't good enough to tease a Rancor just to not deliver on. That was the whole thing I thought. I was like, oh, he's going to get a Rancor. Oh, it's Chewie. And I'm like, man, the Chewie reveal was just a Rancor misdirect? Nah, we can do better.
Yeah. I have a thought about L3, about a way to fix that. And I'll come right out of the gate that it is not my thought, is my lovely wife, Lena Anderson. We were chatting about this movie, and I was like, the one thing I don't know how to fix is this goddamn robot activism plot. I don't know how you do this, because it just grosses me out. Everything about the way they handle this character feels like dated and weird, and like they're trying to make a joke about activism or feminism, and I don't know what they're doing. And Lena had a phenomenal fix that I think is hilarious and would elevate this movie a lot. Instead of making her a stereotype of an annoyingly political activist who's always bringing up their pet cause, and that everyone else sort of rolls their eyes at, which is just like such a wild choice that they made for that characterization. Lena pitched that this is a droid who is aware of the sort of paradox of droids in Star Wars, that while they are personified and treated as people, they are also like objects and tools that, like, at the end of the day, the people don't care about and treat as more property than people. L3 is a giant nihilist. L3 is the first droid who understands like the cruel joke of a droid existence, and as a result is like still sarcastic and sassy and obnoxious in the way that she is in the movie, but also just like has a very like devil may care, like go out guns a-blazing, get yourself in over your head and like get shot at, and who cares, because I'm a droid and life is meaningless and I only feel what I'm programmed to feel, so who gives a fuck. And that's her bit, is not like, I believe that droids are sentient and need to be freed, but that like I understand the joke of my existence and I will take every opportunity to get it over my head as a result of it. And then you contrast that with Lando genuinely caring about her.
Yeah.
And that's
Liam and I both perked up, and we were both thinking that exact
Robin
thing.
wasn't going to get there anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, Lando actually has like puts meaning in this relationship, and that's sort of the thing you're exploring, is like, does this relationship have meaning just because he places meaning on it? You know, is there more to it than that? there's something to explore there instead of this weird sort of half joke they're trying to make about activism.
And it just, not only that, you get Lando's love gives her meaning, but also now she's going to meet this mashup of Kira and Nest, who's going to start a revolution, and it's like she's perfect to join that cause and contribute to that,
It also
and if you
dies.
want to do the thing where she dies and goes into the Falcon, instead of that, like, that was the part that sat the weirdest with me, because in her current incarnation, she prizes freedom and autonomy and sentience over everything else, and they take her brain and trap it inside the Falcon forever. And it's implied that she's like still kind of sentient in there, because there's a callback in a later movie where 3PO talks to the Falcon and says it has like a weird dialect and a weird attitude. So it's like she's alive in there to some degree, suffering for all eternity in the worst hell that she could have imagined. Whereas if she's a nihilist and views herself as like a piece of equipment, then this is like a much better resolution to her arc, that she gets to continue to be useful and to serve a purpose.
But even further to that, if she decides during the course of her arc in the film that she genuinely has feelings for Lando back, then the willingness to be downloaded into the Falcon makes more sense at that point, because then she can continue to be it's a way for her to continue to be with him in a way.
I just had a thought, it would be really great if the robot is the nihilist, if it was like an old broken down version of the robots from Phantom Menace. The ones that get
battle
cut down like butter, because
Roger.
like it would have if it would have every reason to be a nihilist, because those things are totally shit and useless. It'd be great,
and it just somehow keeps avoiding death. Like every time, it's like, all right, I'm going to run out there and get gunned down. This is what I was built for. And then at the end of every encounter, it's like, how did you get at it? Like, you're still alive, really? And the droid's like, no, I'm not alive, and that's the problem.
That would have been so much fun.
Sweet.
Anyway, all credit to Lena for that. That is not my intellectual
Super
property,
good.
but I loved it so
Super
much and said I would share it.
No, it's a solid fix for the character, actually.
Yeah. I have another suggestion. I don't know if I guess it's a note, but one of the things I think I might change would be the director and overall the style. At the top of the show, we were talking about how the Suicide Squad, it was kind of fun that, like, the DC movies seem to just be trying to do standalone stuff with its own far-out style. And even just the way James Gunn took on Guardians of the Galaxy and sort of gave it, like, a real, true, like, visual aesthetic that like, there's Marvel movies, and then within the pastiche of Marvel movies, there's the Guardian movies. I think all these, like, side story Star Wars stuff, it's a great opportunity to have stuff not look exactly like Star Wars. Still be a Star Wars movie deep down, still have all that stuff. And then also for Greg's thing at the comment at the beginning, maybe not so gray and muddy. Instead of Ron Howard and instead of whoever they fired early on, get Guy Ritchie and tell him to make Lock, Stock again. And
This is a very Guy Ritchie flick, isn't it?
Yeah, give it a heist movie pastiche. Give it a heist that kind of flair. Like, have fucking bassy reggae playing in the back. No, maybe that's a little excessive, but like that kind of like camera shots of people's feet walking while they carry a briefcase, and freeze frames where we go into a character's head and hear their inner monologue. Like, do it with some style. That is still very much a Star Wars movie. If you see, lightsabers and droids and shit, you're going to know it's Star Wars. But yeah, if it had the same aesthetic as like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels or Snatch, or pick your favorite heist director. Mine's Guy Ritchie. I think it just would have made it stand out from the whole Star Wars oeuvre. So
Further to that, I took issue with the score a few times in this film. And it's a problem that crops up in the sequel trilogy as well. They play a lot of music for nostalgia, but not for the actual purpose of the music. There's a lot of leitmotifs in Star Wars in the original, like John Williams score for the original trilogy, and in the sequel trilogy especially, a lot of it gets repurposed just for the nostalgia, but it's not used in the proper context, so it actually doesn't make sense. And they do that a lot in this movie too, where like the Star Wars theme plays or the asteroid battle theme plays from Empire at moments in the movie where it's like, did you need to do that there? Did you? Or are you just doing it because you want us to feel feelings? And I think that they could have made a much more original score for this film. Yeah, and I think that's
aside from the traditional Star Wars stuff, I didn't think there was anything really memorable in it as far as the score was concerned.
And the Star Wars stuff was just there to be like, hey, remember the Star Wars theme? Are you feeling feelings now? We're seeing the Falcon for the first time, so we're going to do some Star Wars music. And it's like, no, just give us an original score. Hire somebody to give us an original score. Or at least
use the leitmotif to contribute to the aesthetic thing I was talking about. Like, give me a synth version of one of the songs instead of John Williams' like orchestral score.
Yeah,
like give it to me in synth. Give it to me on a bass. Give it to me like
And I have two examples to back up why this is an excellent point. One is, we've seen what this looks like, and it's The Mandalorian. Ludwig Göransson that does the score for that. Like, that theme for The Mandalorian is amazing and iconic and doesn't sound like anything else in Star Wars, but also sounds instantly Star Wars.
Yes. 100%.
And we could have had that in this. The other one I immediately thought of was we already referenced the rebooted Star Trek at one point, which, like, I understand that it's not, from a Star Trek movie, is maybe not the pinnacle of Star Trek. But I'll go to bat for a lot of things in that movie, and the score is absolutely one of them. Rather than just riffing on the original theme from the original series or like familiar motifs from throughout Star Trek, they come up with a brand new theme in that movie, and like it's one of those ones that you may have forgotten about because like who thinks about the J.J. Abrams Star Trek on a regular basis? But like go back and listen to the theme from that; it slaps. It's so good.
I do love that theme quite a bit.
It's such a good piece of score. I love it so much. We could have had that.
Could have had that and didn't.
Speaking of Star Wars, it was Star Trek Day, or sorry, speaking of Star Trek, it was Star Trek Day yesterday, and I was thinking today about how, the Star Trek and Star Wars have always been kind of at odds with each other in terms of their fan base, and I think it's funny that both franchises eventually kind of ended up being a series of pretty bad movies with a couple good ones, and a television series that's actually really good. It's kind of weird how they both kind of lined up when initially they were complete opposites.
Also, both fan bases have a lot of beef with J.J. Abrams.
Yeah. Yes. a lot. He torched both of them.
He is the glue that binds the fandoms together.
Like a Pratt comedian, like he picks up Star Wars, drops it, and goes, oops, and then turns around and picks up Star Trek and goes,
oh no,
oops.
The irony is, here's the real irony. When I first saw the rebooted Star Trek, I was like, wow, that was a great Star Wars movie. This was definitely J.J. Abrams making a case for why he should be in charge of the next Star Wars movie. And then he made the subsequent Star Wars movies, and I was like, did not want that. Nope. Be careful what you wish for. Wow.
We are far too late in the podcast to be talking about Rise of Skywalker.
Litigating Rise of Skywalker will take probably 2 or 3 episodes, I think.
That's we should do like a mini series, like a 3-part like deep dive. That fucking movie.
Think so.
I'm torn between wanting to beg for a spot and wanting to never see that movie again.
Yeah.
Well, we've had lots of thoughts on this flick, and so did our listeners. Thank you, everyone who contributed at I Have Some Notes on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Instagram. We're at I Have Some Notes Pod. But thank you for adding your comments, and I'm gonna read them now. Chris, I assume the same Chris that suggested this one.
Correct.
Pretty common name though. Who knows? But I just have Chris here comments. There are too many pointless deaths. The Favreau and Newton characters should have hung around until the end. Make the robot death the single meaningful one instead of killing off characters every 20 minutes. Also, less screen time, preferably 0 screen time, spent forcing the audience to sit through alien poker. Everyone involved in those scenes should be embarrassed.
I mean, I'm okay with there being one poker game. There definitely doesn't need to be two.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of discussed keeping the rest of Beckett's crew around maybe a little longer. I think you definitely Beckett still needs to die at the end of the movie. Like, that's kind of his arc. Is he's in a way he's Han's Obi-Wan. He needs to die at the end of the movie, and the fact that Han shoots him first, perfect. Chef's kiss. Doesn't even give him time to finish what he's saying. Just blam, he's dead.
Can he get the gun from Woody Harrelson? Can Woody Harrelson use that blaster, his iconic blaster, for the entire movie, and then Han gets it from him at the end after we've seen it get used by Woody Harrelson and we have some emotional attachment and we understand what this transfer, what giving him the gun means, instead of it just being a random weapon that he gets tossed one night for that has no sentimental attachment whatsoever?
I'm down with that.
Yeah.
Alan Gould comments, cut out most, if not all, of the let's explain this weird detail from the original trilogy nods. Han is supposed to have a whole new career before New Hope. His entire backstory shouldn't be that one time.
Yeah, we kind of discussed that. Like, his entire character was stamped out in a week. It doesn't need to be that way. This can be one of Han's adventures before A New Hope, and not every, like I said, like, he doesn't need to win the Falcon at the end of the movie. That can be set up for that happens later. He's got his eye on it, though. He wants it. He knows he wants it, but he doesn't get it this time.
Olav comments, tell the story of someone not involved with the original Star Wars trilogy. Tell the story of someone not involved in the original trilogy of the Star Wars movies. Have him weave in and out of the lives of Han Solo, Lando, etc. If they feel the need to fill in bits of backstory, do so while subverting expectations. Exactly, like, be clever and cool about it, not obvious and tasteless about it.
Yeah, it would kind of almost be interesting to have the central character of the movie be someone else involved with the heist, seeing Han and Lando and Chewie through someone else's eyes.
Like The Great Gatsby?
Well, like, what if Beckett was the main character of this movie?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's necessarily the best direction. I'm following Olav's train of thought. What if you did that? It might be interesting to see the characters from a different point of view, which, as we all know from Star Wars, is very important to the Jedi philosophy.
From a certain point of view.
I still think if you're making a Han Solo movie, you still have Han Solo be the main character, though.
I love the idea of telling the story of someone completely unrelated to the original trilogy, but if there's one thing we know from all of Star Wars, and especially The Mandalorian, they can never leave well enough alone. They can't tell a self-contained story. Luke always has to show up and ruin everything. I'm still mad about that season 2 finale.
As expansive as Star Wars supposedly is, like, it's actually a pretty narrow universe. Like, when
it's all about like 3 people,
very small.
Yeah. And when you cut out certain touchstones like lightsabers, stormtroopers, etc., is it still Star Wars?
I think it could be, but the creators are terrified to find out, and will never take that risk.
Like, Disney especially is just the safest movie company when it comes to these kinds of franchises. They don't rock the boat.
We have a hugely successful self-contained Star Wars TV show. Get Luke in there. ASAP. Boba Fett 2. Are recognizable names, brands that we own and can merchandise now.
At I Hate Your Taste says, the fact that Alden was so good in Hail Caesar and then Solo flopping basically stalled his career, it's a major bummer.
Now, I'm gonna just kind of rewind a little bit in the podcast here. Alden is really great in this movie, too. Alden Ehrenreich is a very good actor. The problem is the movie was kind of a flop, and it did kind of stall out his career, and that is a major bummer.
Cinematological says, answers questions no one asked. Could have been an adaptation of 3 Han Solo books from the 70s, which were awesome adventures of a pirate trying to make his way in the world.
As a kid who owned those books, absolutely agree with this note.
Andrew Craig says, the biggest problem by far is they crammed every single story beat into a first movie. Anything Han said in the OG trilogy was touched on, and it just wasn't necessary. There's lots of good moments, but the slavishness to fan service made it messy. I think a cool idea would have been to bookend it with Han telling Ben the story before he went into the train with Luke. A touching moment like that would really twist the knife for Force Awakens.
I strongly disagree with that because I think that this movie should be as divorced from those terrible sequels as absolutely possible. Though I will say, my pitch for a Lando Calrissian movie, and I know I was just informed they're making a series about it, and I'm super hyped for it, was to have Billy D. Williams sitting around a sabacc table telling a story of his younger days, and it keeps flashing back to Donald Glover playing young Lando. And
so good.
And Billy D. Williams' narration wouldn't quite line up with what was happening in reality. He'd be embellishing it.
That'd be great.
So it'd be like an example would be like him being like, and they were instantly won over by my charm. And then it smash cuts to like young Lando being like punched in the face or running from laser fire or something.
Yeah, like a reverse not reverse Han Solo, a reverse Ron Howard in Arrested Development.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're going to do that. They did not do that. Yeah.
That was my pitch for a Lando movie.
That's great.
I'm a little sad it's not going to happen, but I'm also super pumped that we'll see more Lando Calrissian.
Nathan Martin says this was a fun Star Wars heist movie. The characters are great, and the action is top-notch. The action scenes are a blast. Lando is amazing. Biggest issue I have with the movie is we didn't need it. We didn't need the last name thing. We didn't need the dice. We didn't need the story, but it's not a bad movie.
Hard agree.
I loved it, but I didn't want it.
Yeah, he's not wrong. We did not need this movie. It's fun for what it is. It could have been more, I think, if they just let it be its own thing. And again, we touched on this off the top. I think that's the thing that's the real stumbling block for this film is that it's trying so hard to be a thing that it doesn't need to be when it's at its best when it's just being its own thing.
Indeed, yeah. Thank you very much for joining us, Robin. Before I thank Robin, I'll do it again. Thank you all who commented. We love having your listener comments. Gives us a place to jump from. Gives us some stuff to read on the air. So thank you. Please continue to do that when we solicit it. And of course, thank you, Robin, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. If you've enjoyed my nonsense here, please check out my other podcast that I'm on, Quantum Kickflip. It's also on the Alberta Podcast Network. It's a fantastic actual play show. Liam is also on it, as well as a bunch of our best and funniest friends in the whole world. And I'm currently editing the next arc that's about to go live that should be, up right around when this airs. And it's so good. I know I'm biased because it's our own stuff, but I think it's some of our best work. And if you ever wanted a jumping on point for this show, now's the time, baby.
Yeah. If you don't want to start at episode 1, I recommend 10, 11, 12, 3-parter. Or the one that's coming out this week.
Yeah, can't wait for people to hear it. It's fantastic stuff. Y'all outdid yourselves. I feel honored to be your GM.
And for anyone who is like, oh, people playing a game, I don't know if I want to listen to people playing a game. We edit the heck out of it, and we're professional improvisers, so it clips along more like a radio play than listening to someone roll dice and be like, I got a 4.
Yeah, I like to think we've streamlined the process a little bit and are more concerned with storytelling than gameplay. Although the gameplay adds a fun wrench in the gears sometimes.
Cool, thank you. So yeah, that's at Quantum Kickflip and wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah,
and again,
quantumkickflip.com.
Please follow us as well at I Have Some Notes and at I Have Some Notes pod on Instagram. Give us a like and subscribe on all the places where you get your podcasts.
Yeah, you know what? We were just talking about Solo, a Star Wars story, and I kind of love this, and I think you should too. Wait a minute. That's also the name of one of our fellow podcasts on the Alberta Podcast Network. I love this. You should too. A podcast about sharing things you like with people that you love, regardless of how terrible it might actually be. You can check out that and more right now at albertapodcastnetwork.com. A bunch of new podcasts, including Quantum Kickflip, just joined the network, so now's a great time to go and check out what might be new.
And as we mentioned off the top of the show, you will be selecting all the movies during Season 7 of I Have Some Notes. So on Monday, when this episode drops, there will also be a poll coming up on Twitter where you can vote for Gunpowder Milkshake, Charlie's Angels 2019. Please don't vote for that one. And Sucker Punch. Those are the choices for our next episode.
You just ensured that everyone's going to vote for the one you didn't want to vote for, didn't you?
If it means they listen to the end of the episode, that's okay by me.
That's fair.
Until then, I'm your host, Liam Kreswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm Greg Beaver. Keep watching the skies.
The show you're listening to is part of the Alberta Podcast Network. Locally grown, community supported. Another show from the network that you should check out is Repodcasting. Have you ever watched a movie and there was an actor in it that was all wrong for the part they were playing? Have you ever wanted to imagine someone else in the role? Never fear. That's precisely why Repodcasting exists. Listen as co-hosts and cousins Janet and Lucia recast their favorite and not-so-favorite movies with their dream cast. They also take a moment each episode to imagine which role in the film should have been given to Tony Danza, because, let's face it, Tony Danza would make every movie better. You can find Repodcasting wherever you listen to podcasts or at albertapodcastnetwork.com. Happy listening!